Hey everybody. Thanks for coming out on this rainy day. Holy moly, did it open up out there, so I'm happy y'all are in here. Um, just got a little bit of housekeeping to go over. Um, I sent out an email. If you didn't get it, let me know. But what it said is on our guild members pages, if you have one and there's an email address, we're going to take the email addresses off. We're going to leave your websites all up there. If you have one and you need to update it, let me know. But what's happening is nefarious agents, I love that term, it's like Grisham novel or something. Nefarious agents are using our web page and they're combing it for email addresses and sending things out, and I don't want that to happen. And on that, we will never send an email saying, or asking for money from anybody for any kind of cause or charity. We don't operate like that. So if you get something like that, let us know and just delete it. If I get a big outcry of objections for removing those emails, let me know and we'll figure out some way of doing it so that people have the information without bots being able to steal it. If you don't have a page yet and you want a page, Lindsay, if you can hover right there where it says submission instructions, you can click on that and fill that out and it'll come to me and I can put your information up and add you as a member on our member page. There's just a few things like a little bio, a couple pictures, and a link to your website. If you have one, you don't have to have one. And that is it. I'm going to pull those emails this weekend. So let me know if you really don't want that to leave your page. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce tonight's speaker is Jill Williams, a Georgia-born watercolorist with over 20 years as a professional artist and a decade of teaching. 3 years ago, she and her husband sold everything to travel the American West in a converted, thanks Booth for influencing me, I know, right? A converted shuttle bus where the stunning landscapes from Rockies peaks to desert sunsets inspired her vibrant watercolors. Jill spent 2 summers in Yellowstone National Park leading watercolor workshops for the Yellowstone Forever Foundation and taught an online watercolor community from the road. Now back in Georgia, she's excited to share experiences of her Western journey and how the West has informed her painting process. Enjoy her painting demo for the Booth Museum Artists Guild this evening. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you all for joining me tonight. I'm looking forward to sharing some stories with you and a demo tonight that basically is me sharing a big breakthrough that I had with you when I was painting on the road. But before I get started, I kind of want to just bring you up to date a little bit. November the 14th, 2019, my husband and I were sick at our stomach while we sat at a closing table waiting for a stack of papers to come in, and we were about to sign away the last 18 years of our lives. And we were sitting there waiting and just exchanging banter with everybody that was there and thinking, are we crazy? Is this really what we're supposed to do? I mean, what if, are we going to walk out of here with the biggest regret of our lives, by doing this, by just trading in our life for something completely brand new that we don't even really know how to do yet? And so we just both sat there with minds racing, and we just kept all those thoughts sort of behind our eyes while we waited. But the paperwork arrived, then it was just a flurry of conversation and signatures and all of that, and we were in the flow. We knew we were not leaving that room until we had signed over everything and handed over the keys to the last 18 years of our lives. So once the meeting concluded with no particular fanfare, we left the building and walked out into the rain. Our car was still packed with a last-minute trip to the house where we had gathered a few last things, and it was just a reminder of how little we actually owned now. But every mile that separated us from that closing table was one layer after another falling away, revealing relief. And we were finally able to start talking again, and we knew that we'd made the right decision. So after a little while, you start to wonder, is this really what we're supposed to do? You start to think about everything that you've gotten rid of and sold and traded and taken to the dump and all these different things. And, our kids were grown. This was a big decision that we made to just start a new life, just to start something completely different. We weren't even sure exactly what we wanted to do, but crossing the Mississippi our first year was a big emotional event for both of us. We had planned to head west through St. Louis, the gateway to the west, and following in the footsteps of those brave souls before us. And we did not have the same life and death challenges as our forebears, certainly. But I did feel a lot like one of those pioneer accounts I had read many years ago, where it was common for settlers braving the New West to actually burn their house down, sweep up those precious nails, take them with them because there wasn't going to be any out there on the homestead. So we definitely felt like we had just burned down our previous life, our past life, to make a new future. And so it was with lots of trepidation that we headed out. We watched Big Sky start coming into view, and we watched all the lush hardwoods and the pines and the hills morph into golden ocean with cottonwood galleries standing watch, almost like they remembered all the olden travelers from before coming through on their first trek west. Every spatial relationship that was ingrained in my Eastern brain was now irrelevant. It took lots of drawing to start shifting my understanding of what I was seeing. We even survived a F2 twister in Kansas. And after vowing to leave Kansas as soon as possible, we ended up visiting the Wizard of Oz Museum to celebrate our Midwest initiation. The Rockies came into view next, and we turned south into New Mexico and Arizona. And New Mexico gave us our first taste of altitude and dry air, which we loved. As a damp, mossy Georgian, hanging up a bath towel for it to be dry inside 10 minutes was like a marvel. We'd never experienced anything like that. Another painting challenge arose, though, at altitude, and it was color. Light plays by a different set of rules at altitude. And I had to learn to see, interpret, and compensate for all the blue cast everywhere, on everything. The intense saturation of sky, all the washed-out white point of the landscape. Lots of color and value studies helped me to start learning to paint what I'd been seeing. Big Sky had captivated us, and just because of the sheer lack of boundaries, but what started as a quick trek out to the Grand Canyon turned into us dirtbagging there for 2 weeks, unable to leave. Something about the Milky Way whirling over that massive void in the earth spoke to us in some ancient language that left us knowing more clearly why we were out there. We were realizing more and more that we had to leave home to find it. Collecting these experiences instead of things had become paramount, and everything we had gone through was worth it. Leaving Arizona was to coincide with a workshop that I was doing in California. But the day before leaving, we found out the workshop had been canceled. Feeling gutted on such a high is a normal thing in life, but sitting 2,000 miles from Georgia when it happened made it feel really heavy. We'd been relying on that income from that workshop to continue our trek north because Montana, Canada, Glacier, all of it was calling. Jay and I found one of the quiet ledges that we'd been visiting over the last couple of weeks, and we just sat there, hoping to see at least one of the two condors who had been sighted recently, and mostly thinking about what to do next. We just didn't have the resources to continue, and just then, both of the condors, in flight, rose out of the canyon, only yards away from our heads and over a mile from the canyon floor. They circled over us for several moments, backlit against the sun, and what seemed like a fairy tale event became a little awkward and frightful because they began to lower their descent right overhead. And at the moment we thought we might be their lunch, they rotated out of their circular pattern and they flew fast and hard over the canyon and just out into the blue until they were out of sight. We just sat there, amazed, honored, humbled, encouraged, and both of our hearts were beating inside our ribs when it dawned on me. I looked at Jay, I said, "They flew north." Was it a message? Were we under the influence of some ancient wisdom? I don't know, but we didn't have enough money. We had either enough money to go to Montana or to go back. So the next morning we said our goodbyes to the canyon and we headed north. Paddling Lake McDonald had been on our to-do list since we were in our 20s, so 30 years and 2 condors later, there we were. We found ourselves longing for the canyon, but Montana set in with her enchantments right away. We enjoyed both sides of Glacier, the Pacific Northwest forest vibe on the west side, and then the stoic, rugged Rocky Mountains on the east side. Our time there was definitely magical. But we were out of time and we were out of resources, and feeling very uncertain about our trip back to Georgia. But then it happened. I got a message from an old art friend I'd known online for many years. She was living and working in Yellowstone and wanted us to come by to see her on our way back to Georgia. On the way, she messaged us again to say, "Hey, do you want to stay the summer? There's a job opening for Jay if he wants it." The trail provided. Deciding to stay allowed us to live in the park for the next 3.5 months and more than pay for our trip back to Georgia the following October. That was the beginning of our adventure and love affair with Yellowstone. We came back the next summer. I taught watercolor courses for the Yellowstone Forever Foundation, and after 9 cumulative months of weekly exploration of the park, our experiences and accomplishments there will be with us forever. Learning to paint the park's features presented so many new challenges, but I'm grateful for the impact that the West has had on my resolve as a painter. I'm thankful for the new sense of direction that I have artistically that continues to show up on my art table. So I appreciate you so much allowing me to be here, share with you, and I really want to share one of my favorite breakthroughs that I learned while I was painting at Yellowstone, and I hope it offers you encouragement and help in your own practice. So thank you so much for letting me be here. I was in Yellowstone for, like a total, cumulatively, not 9 months back to back, but we were there for 3.5 months, and then there for a little over 5 months. Then last summer, didn't get to go back this current summer. We're here in Georgia, staying for a little while, but Yellowstone is its own thing. I don't know how many of you have been to Yellowstone. I can't really see your faces exactly, but I see some hands going up. Awesome. All right, so you already know that Yellowstone is it's kind of its own planet, and especially as an Easterner, like I had described in my little monologue, as an Easterner with an Eastern set of eyes, getting out into big sky and seeing all the spatial relationships really change, seeing colors change at altitude, seeing a lot of different things happen. The sheer scale of things out west they're daunting, okay? When you're used to just painting little streams and little sheds and, and different things, and then you've got the Grand Canyon, or you've got Mount Washburn, or you've got whatever it is. It takes a toll on your thought process as a painter, and it's like, what do I really even know about drawing and painting anymore? Once I had to really make a lot of changes in the way that I work. And so I just got back in I stay in my sketchbook, but I really got back in the sketchbook and started trying to figure out what it was that I was doing. So if you've painted out west, if you've drawn out west, and these are already some challenges that you've been through or overcome, then you're already there. You're ahead of the game. You already know. But it was a lot of work for me, and so each one though presented its own breakthrough. And working with with all the thermal features that are in the park, that was one of the standout things. They're so ethereal. They're just beautiful. They're everywhere, as you know. But learning to paint them was a big struggle for me. And every time I would try, it just kind of looked like this pitiful little weird white spot in the middle of my painting that just didn't read. It didn't convey the thing that I was seeing. I was really struggling with it really, really hard. And so what I finally, but I just kept looking. I kept sketching, I kept drawing, I kept really staring at the pictures and trying to figure out what was going on. What am I seeing? And it finally dawned on me that in a similar way to clouds, there is sort of there's an anatomy to a thermal event. There's an anatomy to a thermal plume, or any of these various thermal shapes that you're seeing, these little ethereal, wispy, whatever that's out there. And I realized that I had to start paying attention to the wind. I had to start paying attention to the air movement around these thermals to begin to have something to latch on to that I could then take it to my paper and start to convey these shapes. And so I don't know, Lindsay, if you can share any one of those, either of those little geyser paintings that I had shared with you. Either one, it doesn't really matter. When she puts this up here, I'll give you a little bit of an idea. I am going to paint. I'm going to do a demo from Old Faithful for you tonight. But I wanted to kind of show you just a little bit of this structure that I'm talking about so that it'll make sense. And I know we're getting there. There we go. All right, so you can see if you look carefully at the cloud, or I'm calling it a cloud, the plume, okay? When the plume comes out, it's always responding to whatever's happening in the air. And so there is a windward side, and then the opposite of that is the leeward side, okay? And so I started picking up on, if I can keep up with what the wind is doing, the wind is coming, in this case it's coming across the landscape, headed to the right, and when that windward side, I get this solid line. I get a hard edge. The edge is not lost, it can be a little bit, but for the most part, I get a harder edge. And then the leeward side, that's where all the dissipation is. It just begins to fall apart. The plume falls apart. You start to see through it. You see the landscape beyond and behind it. And I know that may sound simple, in the explanation of it, but when I first started just sitting down with it, I was trying to treat it just like it was a cloud, because at first glance, it's like it just kind of looks like a cloud, but it just doesn't behave that way in relationship to the landscape features and shapes around it, okay? Because it does look weird if you just do a landscape and then there's this cloud that's just sort of perched on the ground. That doesn't work, and that's kind of what that's what my interpretations were looking like in the beginning. So let's see, let me see the other one, Lindsay, if you don't mind. It'll just give another example of that, the windward side versus the leeward side. Okay, you can see you got I like to tell my students, they got the crispy edges, okay, and then you've got these soft, lush, all the lost edge work is starting to happen here. So with watercolor, we're definitely handling this, with a more dry environment to get that hard edge, and then more wet on wet for that. And like I said, it seems so simple, but I don't know why it took me a while to get to that breakthrough point. But I want to share with you, I'm going to do a demo of Old Faithful for you tonight. And I don't know if, is it possible that while I'm painting, I see the photo that I'm working with, but is it possible for them to see the photo that I'm working with? Okay, awesome. And then how many watercolorists do I have here, by the way? One, two, three. Okay, great. All right. So I know a lot of times, especially at the booth or with a lot of artist guilds, it's the oil painters, the oil painters, the oil painters. There's so few watercolorists. So I'm so glad that you're here. And for those of you who don't normally paint in watercolor, I want you to prepare to be amazed, be dazzled, or at least moderately entertained. All right, so this is a photo that I took of Old Faithful. It's not in the full expression of Old Faithful. This was kind of like it was gearing up, okay, before an eruption. But I want to, just even looking at the photo, you can see the windward side is getting that a little bit of a sharper edge, while the leeward side, all the dissipation is happening over here. Okay, so we can really start to treat that with more wet on wet and that type of thing. So let's kind of get into it. I've got my board, and I don't know, is it even possible for them to see the photo at the same time? Like, is there like a little window insert of the picture? I'm not sure if we can. If she's able to do that, that'll be great. But that is the photo that I'm working with. All right, so let me just get started. I've got a little sketch here, and you might not be able to see it. Oh, you can see it. All right, at the bottom of the page, there's a little bit of masking fluid that I had kind of sprinkled on the page before I got here so that it would have time to dry. It just gives me a little bit of foreground texture. If you're a painter, you know that you're minding your scale at all times, and I wanted a little bit of, heavier texture in that foreground area, and the masking fluid was going to help me achieve some things that I wanted to do there. But we didn't have the waiting time to dry. So I've just got a little technical pencil that I like to sketch with, and I tell my students I kind of like to use a little technical pencil to sketch with. It's because it's much lesser quality than a drawing pencil, and I don't get quite as much smudging. It's one of the reasons I like to use it, and it also gives me a little bit finer line up under my drawing, or excuse me, under my watercolor. I don't mind having some pencil work come through. So just real quickly, I'm kind of establishing just a baseline of some of my shapes here. It's not a real drawing, it's just a sketch so that I know where I am. And I'm kind of doing it for your benefit too as a viewer, because it just kind of helps you to see where I'm going. There are often times when I'm sketching out, and had months to do that in Yellowstone. Sometimes, especially if you're sketching or painting outside on a regular basis, you kind of get to the point where you don't even worry about the sketching part. You just go ahead and start getting the pigment in there. Okay, sure. Yeah, I'm just kind of mapping out a little sense of direction here. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do for a drawing. Are we able? Oh, okay, great. Yeah, all right, so awesome. That gives you a chance to see it. All right, so I do have a little bit of a sketch here, and I'm going to go ahead and start working up some color here. I don't know, I'm totally willing to kind of go through and tell you all the colors I'm using. Is that important to you, or do you want me to just say I'm using blue? Does it matter to you? Usually when I'm teaching, I will kind of give some direction, some sense of direction on that. Since I don't hear any takers, I think I'll probably just go ahead. Okay, awesome. All right. Thank you. Are you a watercolor painter? I love you. Thank you. Awesome. All right, so I'm using a little bit of cerulean blue here. I'm getting a tiny little touch of some phthalo. Very, very rich, biting color that will kind of go into the paper really, really nicely. So we know that that's going to kind of give us a little bit of color. So I'm coming around here. This is right on dry paper with my wet brush and with some of this intense blue. And because it's dry, it's going to really bite into the paper a little bit more and stay with me. As I work my way down, I'll ease up on that pigment. And then quickly, I'm going to come over here to this side. I'm going to go ahead and start wetting my paper. And I'm looking at my reference photo as I go. But you can already see that hard edge. If you can kind of envision a little bit. Kind of getting some wet paper into all the areas that I know I want to be soft. And then I'm just going to come in here and start working some of that sky into these wet on wet areas so that, I'm starting to see that dissipation, starting to see through that a little bit more clearly. And I will just let some of that just run and let, just kind of play with it. I'm sorry, I almost slung water onto the carpet. I'm going to be a good person and not do that. And here, I'll do it in my own workspace. I almost did that. All right, I'm going to keep working into the foreground a little bit. I'm just wetting the paper a little bit. I've got a color here that's one of my favorites. It's not your standard, you'd have it on your palette, but Daniel Smith makes this. This is cyclorite, which is a mineral, and they make one of their pigments out of this. But it's just an earthy tone that kind of looks like a burnt umber, but because of that real heavy mineral content, there's a lot of granulation. All of those heavy mineral components, they just begin to, settle into the pools of the paper. I am using an Arches 140-pound paper here. I'm also getting into some Quin Gold, which is a beautiful yellow tone. Yellow is kind of, if you want to think about it, it's like yellow ochre, but with attitude. It's got a lot of different nice qualities to it that let it sort of, I don't know, it has a lot of dispersion, so it likes to bleed off into other colors, and so it's kind of nice and fun to play with too. As you can see, I like to work with a soft touch, a lot of water, and also just kind of keeping things fresh and loose. This is a color that I love by Daniel Smith too. I pretty much use Daniel Smith colors primarily, but this is Rare Green Earth, and I use it so much for all of those distant tree lines. It's just got that perfect tone to it. And then again, I've got to come down in here and sort of treat these little areas with a little bit of moisture here. This is still some of that, that the leeward edge of the plume, breaking up over the landscape. So I've got to kind of maintain that as I'm going here. And then there'll be times too where I might even just alter the landscape, because we all know if you're painting, sometimes you got to find the landscape. You're being inspired and informed by what you're looking at, but at the same time, you've got to, maybe you really don't need that tree to be there, and it's okay to not do that tree, or maybe you do need one there, and it's okay to do that. I'm just dropping down to a smaller brush so I can kind of control how much water I've got going in here. I've got a little bit of water that I'm putting in here to intentionally create a bloom here, forcing some of that pigment back and away from this area right here, because I want that to sort of look like that, the little wispy bits that are hanging out. Just give it a little softness right there. All right, I've got another color here that's called Bloodstone, and it's a dark gray, but it's transparent, if that makes sense. But it's very granulated as well. But I love to come in here and use this color for a lot of different natural features. It almost looks like stone. It's got granulation. It is kind of composed of ground up mineral, and so you get all of that grainy. It's wonderful. There's really not anywhere that you put it that it doesn't work for you in some way. And then feel free to ask questions. I can talk while I'm painting. So as many times as I demo for people, I'm totally able to kind of talk, answer questions if you've got them, and it can be about whatever. All right. It's a good question. It's a great question. So that was one of the first things I started learning how to deal with in New Mexico, just because we were at altitude. And so before taping my paper down, I would actually spritz the back of my paper, tape it down, and then spritz well, I would do any kind of sketching or whatever I wanted to do for a layout, and then just spritz it, and then kind of let it sit for a few minutes, and then that would just maintain enough of a moisture level that would be it was almost the same thing as having dry paper in a humid environment, if you can think of it that way. It just kind of maintained that for me, but it did work well, and every time we go back out there, I always have to remember to do that. And there's a learning curve, when we're out there for a while and then we come back east. I have to remember I've got to either stop spraying or add the spray, one or the other, depending on where I'm at in the cycle of traveling. All right, so I'm using another color here. This is oh dear, I think I might have forgotten its name. I usually have serpentine green genuine is what I normally have on my palette. I'm out of that at the moment, and so I was using a different one, and I might have to look that up when I'm at a less critical juncture here. I'm trying to just get these little tree shapes in, and I just want to just kind of smudge these in. I'm not going for, I just want to maintain a soft little kind of, I kind of like the idea of just having almost like a memory, of these things. But it gives me lots of granulation. I don't know, let's see if I can see all the granulation, all of that grainy, that's all the different minerals that are used in a lot of these pigments, and they just make beautiful marks on the page. All right, so I'm just kind of pushing some values here, playing around with that. This is just a little bit of yellow ochre in here. I'm going to kind of bring that up there, just kiss right against the edge of that, just to cause a little bit of bleeding on purpose there. This is a color called Lunar Black, and I love it because it's a lot like the Bloodstone. It's black, but it's transparent. It's got a lot of granulation, but the size of the particle is different, so it helps me with scale. So if I've got things off in the distance, I can use the Bloodstone because it's got a much smaller particulate, so that scale is much smaller, pushes things in the background. But then the Lunar Black has a much larger particulate, and so I can afford to use that when I start moving toward middle ground, foreground, whatever the case may be. All right, so I'm just going to kind of keep working through and building up some of these textures a little bit. I've got some of my green is getting really excited and taking off up into the sky, and sometimes I really don't care about that, but if it starts looking a little bit too green, I'll try to mop up. And then I'm not the neatest painter, so sometimes it does help to kind of keep your tape clean, or else you'll have some things wanting to sort of, run away or come back into places that you really didn't mean for them to. Yeah, good question. So I don't know. See, this is not really showing me like a sheen or a shine at all. I don't know. Can you just see from where you're sitting? If I tilt the paper, can you see it shine? Okay, all right. So in the areas where I'm working wet on wet, there's no puddles. Okay, there aren't puddles, but it's definitely fairly damp. All right, so I'm coming in here and seeing the need to touch in some of these little places here. I'm just seeing a little suggestions of green. And, just like with any painting, our goal is, regardless of medium, we want that painting to be fresh. We want it to be certain, the idea ultimately for every painter, I feel like, is much like a poet, just use the words that you need to say the thing. And, just use the brush marks that you need to show the thing, And, but, that's the constant battle that the painter is always working with, is just making sure that the mark is needed, and trying to keep it fresh and not overworked. And then if you're painting with watercolor, a lot of times that becomes definitely harder to do, just because you don't there's kind of no do-over. I mean, there's a small amount of possibility of do-over. You can, if you're going to get dark enough, to come back in and correct some values in an area, but for the most part, you want to try to be as intentional and sort of as accurate as you want to. But then also, as you're evolving as a painter, you want to start having your own voice, your own interpretation, your own expression of it. And having been an artist who, when I was coming through, I did go to school, and I tell my students this sometimes, and I don't think they do this way anymore, but I mean, we had to draw for 2 years before you even got to take a painting class. You had to go through those things. And I can remember being frustrated with that as as a 17-year-old or 18-year-old. But I would not, oh my gosh, I wouldn't take anything for it now. I'm so glad that I learned how to learn those disciplines, and be able to continue to bring that into my work as we go. So, as we're working as painters, all the time that we spend learning our craft, honing our craft, adding new skills to what we do that bring these images to life. The more we do it, I think that if we start out really having some good foundation, it makes it so much easier for your voice to come along, okay? Because if you don't really have the foundations to kind of build on, it's hard for you to get to have your own version of it if you've never had one to just begin with, to have a foundation that you started with, if that makes sense. As an instructor, I do run into the issues of students not wanting to take time to learn to sketch, or those different things. But every time, I've never experienced a time when a student went through the process, went through the trouble, started drawing, and gosh, in just even 3 months, I mean, their painting, the caliber of their paintings was just, it was just palpable. And they were so pleased that they went through the pain, that they went through the trouble. And and if you draw and you've drawn long enough, you realize that once you kind of start operating at a certain level, it's pretty easy for you to maintain and to kind of keep going there. All right, I want to get back into my cerulean a little bit and kind of push that into some of this green that I was using. I just want to kind of tie these color families together just a little bit. These are some of my darker greens that I was using. I'm just making kind of a mud here, but it's just the different greens that I was using. I want to just kind of add a little bit of that cool tone in here, just in a few places. And then I want to spend a little bit of time. I want to go back. I've been kind of letting the plume just sort of sit here, do what it's going to do. If you paint with watercolor at all, you know that watercolor is not obedient. It's like sort of spilling over a box of cats. They're going to do what they want to do. And so once you sort of develop a passage of painting with watercolor, and then you move on to another passage, you come back to the first passage, and then you'll see that it looks a little different than when you left it. It had a mind of its own and did a few extra things. And I think that's one of the things that's annoyed me the most about watercolor when I first started, but now it's the thing that I cherish the most. Watercolor has helped me to not be a very uptight person, and to go with the flow. It really does make a difference. All right, so I think what I'm going to do now, I'm going to come in here. I'm just using my towel I might have waited a little bit too long. I'm just lifting out a few of these. And then see, I've got a little bit of a green plume that sort of happened here because some of that tree color ran off and, had a relationship with the blue that was going on in the sky. But I'm okay with that. The value is okay. So a lot of times with watercolor, if you have colors moving in and out of one another, if the values are okay, you're still serving the painting, okay? Because values are everything. Values are what give you all the form that you need, all of that good stuff. All right, so our plume is there. I've got this, the windward edge and then this leeward edge. It's starting to look, the shape of it is right, but I'm missing some form. So let's kind of come in and work up a little bit of shadows. Need a little bit of something in here to indicate that we've got form, because clouds are, they're not solid. We won't get into a science class. They're not solids, but they do have form. All right, so I'm wetting the areas that I want to sort of keep soft. I know my water's kind of dirty, but that's okay. And then I'm using just some neutral tint here. And the reason I'm doing that, I'm not trying to get any granulation happening in here. I'm just really wanting to kind of focus on the value a little bit. So I'm just kind of looking at my cloud shape here, and just like I tell my students, over the course of this painting, the shapes that I have, I'm kind of deviating from the photo, and I think that's okay. I spent way too many years copying the photo exactly, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's much to be gained, and you're a better painter for it. But there does come a time where you want to just be able to know what it is that you want to do. And I will tell my students, paint the painting you've got. You're a long way from that photo now, so let's just keep going down that path. Don't try to change the path. You're on your way. All right, so you can see it's starting to have, now we got a little bit of volume is present now. And I don't want to overdo it. I'm going to add a little bit up here. But I keep just doing a push and pull of dry edge to wet edge, and that depends on either putting water down first, bringing pigment to it, or sometimes I will put pigment down and then bring water to it. You get different edges with each one, okay? So it kind of depends on what your goals are. All right, I've got a bunch of one color sort of really contaminating this certain well. Here, let me get this cleaned out a little bit. All right, so I'm getting back into my rare green earth, and it's sort of just it's grainy. It's got a lot of nice granulation, but it's just basically this greenish, grayish, bluish. It's perfect. It's the same color as a ridge of trees that are, about 15 miles away. It's perfect. All right, so I'm just adding a little bit of water to my paper there because I want to come in with this. Just refining a few values here. Keeping that soft. This is my my leeward edge of the plume here. So I still want to refine a few values, but I got to keep those edges nice and soft. And I should have said something. I didn't say it earlier. This type of meeting, it feels kind of like really formal, I guess. There's so few of us here, you could have totally just like come up here and stood around. I don't have a problem with that. You can probably see it better if you do it that way. This one right here, it is a very inexpensive brush. I love it because I can be mean to them and just destroy it if I need to, and then I can just go get another one. This is it's a Princeton brush. It's their Neptune series. I don't know if you can, that might not be able to, but it's a 1/4 inch dagger, and the reason that I use the dagger is that I get this nice point, like a fine line brush. And with oil painters, you're lucky in that if you want to do a fine line with a one of those tiny detail brushes, you're using oil, so the pigment just kind of goes and goes and goes, a pretty good ways. But with the watercolor, you're limited in how much the brush can hold. And so with this, I like using these. You've got the tiny little tip like a detail brush. Let me get it in a white area, but you can see the tiny little tip. But then look at this fat body of the brush. You've got this reservoir that's holding pigment, it's holding water, it's holding whatever you need it to, and then but it'll just deliver right out of that tip in a way that lets you kind of just keep working. If you've got a tiny little detail brush and you're constantly dipping, painting, you lose all that immediacy, all that spontaneity, and it starts to look stiff and frustrated because you were stiff and frustrated trying to fight your brush. So that was a long answer, but yes, Princeton Neptune 1/4 inch dagger. I love them. Let's see. Let me just chase a few more values here. I've got a lot of nice mid-tones and some lights, but I need to push my darks just a little bit. One thing about watercolor as you're working with it, when you get ready to start chasing some values, and again, oh my gosh, if you're not a watercolor painter, this will seem odd. So when you're oil painting, you're starting with your darks, working through your midtones, and you're finishing off with your highlights. And watercolor is the opposite. You're starting everything light, work toward the midtones, and then finish off with your darks. And then occasions where you can come back with some, maybe some white gouache or something like that if you want to just maybe hit a highlight here and there. But it really does matter, however you're getting the values down, chase them down. That's what I tell my students. They're not going to just jump out at you. You've got to push harder than you think. Sometimes it feels kind of uncomfortable to put, such a dark value sometimes, but it really does matter to make sure that you've got those in there. All right, I'm going to get my bigger brush. Where's my bigger brush? All right, so my bigger brush, now I will say this, nobody likes this, and it's just true. I've painted with oils and I've painted with watercolors, and good brushes matter. They do. And I have found that over the years that, working with watercolor brushes, the quality matters even more. And it's unfortunate because that means you're getting into some money, that you've got to spend on the brushes. But I have found, I've got this brush that I'm using right here. This is a brush that I can't even really get anymore, which makes me sad. But it's a Kolinsky Sable, and this was like it's like a $120 brush, but it does everything that I want it to do. It holds the amount of water that I need it to hold. It releases the amount of water that I need it to release. It will do just absolutely everything that I want it to do, but it's expensive. But over time, I have also been learning that these Chinese brushes right here, I think this is an $8 brush. It is natural hair. Natural hair is really the key. There's so much that you can't do without it. Now this little liner brush, it's synthetic squirrel, but this liner brush gets used for details. It's not getting used for me to lay in big sections of color. It's just meant for, some details. So I'm kind of not worried about the hair quality of it. But I have, found that, if you're just getting started out, one of those Chinese brushes is really a good way to do it, really a good way to go. Now I'm just using a piece of paper here to cover up the top half of my paper, top half of my painting, just because I just wanna play a little bit and get some little splatters happening in the foreground. And I don't want them to get anywhere else that they shouldn't be. All right, let's take a look and see where we're at. All right, I could kind of keep chasing some things, and I do see, gosh, you start painting. I know, what time is it? Am I keeping you? Yeah, we got to go. All right, so I'm going to finish this up and let this sit here and dry. But that's basically the demo that I have for you, is this. Once this is dry, and I think that the camera's not really doing the painting justice, I would love for you to come up here and take a look at it too. Does anybody have any questions about what I've done, or do you think that even in an oil-based situation, these different types of edges, you're working with edges all the time as a painter, but I think that they can help you in this situation, and certainly with clouds, but definitely when you're working with these types of shapes, ground-based, it makes a big difference. So I think that's what I have for you tonight. Unless you've got questions, please let me know. Yes?
The big observation that you came to about the anatomy of the thermal features, did you come to that by painting plein air or just being out there for a period of time and observing?
Both, really, yeah, because when you're out there, I find that, I'm sorry, what did somebody? Oh, okay. I didn't know if somebody had a question. When I'm out there, I like to spend a lot of time sketching, especially if it's something that's brand new, like getting out into the West. I mean, I'm better at it now because I've been out there for several months now. But when I first got there, the scale of everything, I couldn't paint it. My brain would not understand the spatial relationships that I was dealing with, and I couldn't convey it on a 2D image. It just wouldn't, it was awful. And so that's when I was like, okay, I'm just going to have to start sketching. I just got to start drawing and looking at what I'm seeing. Forget the camera photos, because, when you're taking a picture of the Tetons, they're majestic. I mean, you're seeing them, and then you take a picture of it, and you're like on your camera, and you're like, they're not. There's just a little hill there. It just all that compression, that vertical compression that you get with your phone. You've got to have some really expensive gear to take a picture of exactly what you see. So I had to just stop with the photo references. I just quit taking pictures, and I just started drawing, and just really drawing it. And then I would use my drawings as like photo references. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would turn back to those. I would still take some pictures because it would give me some color information, and that's a whole other story there. We won't get into that, but your phone lies to you. It's not; those are not the colors. But once I started just drawing, just getting back in my sketchbook, that made a big, big difference in allowing me to just sort of get that breakthrough. Yeah. Did somebody? Yes, please. I use Arches primarily. There are some others that I use. I use the Arches 140-pound cold press as my primary paper, but I like Saunders. Saunders is really good, and I like Winsor Newton paper as well. Anybody else? Yes, and in fact, if you're patient enough, I can dry that, and then I'll take this off, because it'll really it'll look nice. It'll look nice, and then while I'm drying, oh, do you want to turn this off while I'm drying, or will that be really loud? I don't know. just a little um, pickup tool here. This will save your fingerprints. You get these in like the drafting section. So I just came in here with a little bit of masking fluid because there are grasses all over the mounds that lead up to the thermal features. And then, once you get sort of out into those plateaued areas before the features, then you get into all that center and, it's crusty, all of that stuff. But right there in the in the foreground, it's a nice way to just add some scale and a little bit of visual texture to kind of tie those things together. And then even once I've got that in here, I'll come in with just, because if everything is all white, it's a little flat, right? So I just kind of try to come in here in a few places and just add a little bit of tint in just a few little spots. I don't want to overwhelm it and make it disappear, but just giving it a little bit of tint in a couple of places. You can start to see. There we go. I love masking fluid. It's a great tool. And I've had a lot of places where I've had some runoff in here, but that's one of the, for my style of painting, I have painted very rigid and tight for many, many years when I was first learning. But, having these overflows in different places and learning to anticipate them is a big key, and that just comes over time. But as long as the values are there, if you took a black and white photo of this, you would not see some big thing of another color in here. You would just see the shapes that were there. And those, I think they just do a nice job at making the painting a little bit more interesting and your own. So anybody's welcome to come and take a look at it. Does anybody have another question? Oh, yes. Yeah, we're in Georgia for several months. We're wintering. We wintered here, and it's summer now, and we're spending some time with family, and there's just some things we're wanting to focus on with family time and that sort of thing. But yes, we still live in our bus conversion, and we will, we take it away we go to some places, close by, maybe out to Alabama and Tennessee, Florida, that kind of a thing, just to go and get away. But yes, we will definitely head back west. Any other questions?
Thank you. Your work is fabulous.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, anyone's welcome to come and take a closer look if you would like.